Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Wall. Today we have a special episode which I hope many of you find valuable. Throughout our lives, we're all reminded that our health is fragile and we can get hurt. For some of us, we may become injured and that injury could seem insurmountable or hopeless. On a selfish note, I've been recovering from an old sports injury and that recovery has been much slower than expected with lots of ups and downs. But as I'm sure many of you can agree, these are a part of day-to-day life, and there are many people who have had much greater fights on their hands. So today's show is dedicated for those that face injuries which pose an opportunity for recovery, even if it's only a slim chance. Today we share 3 stories from 3 of my friends who have overcome traumatic injuries. Each story will highlight their attitude, their perseverance, and the amazing capabilities of our bodies to heal when we put our minds to it. First, we'll hear from Brandon Chase, who's a man who was never supposed to wake up from a traumatic car accident, let alone be able to join me on today's show. He may have had an injury that changes the way he speaks, but it's given him a voice and a message that he's passionate about sharing. The second story is my good friend Dave Whelan, who during his professional skiing endeavors had a terrible accident which left his legs shattered at the bottom of a cliff, alone and not sure if anybody would find him. After 2 years of rehab, he now skis, bikes, paddles, and moves like he could before. Lastly, we're joined by Candice Carnahan, who's a university friend of mine and has gone on to travel the world sharing her message and safety after a mill incident took her leg. So these stories aren't stories of injuries. These are stories of overcoming even the toughest challenges. Now, if you're one of those people who are facing a daunting rehab from an injury, then I hope that these stories inspire you like they have me. Let's start today's show off by hearing from my friend, Brandon Chase. Hey, Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hello, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to chat with you. We've been talking about this for a little while. I've been tracking your story, and you've got quite an amazing recovery story. So let's start off with a bit of background. Tell me a bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? All that good stuff.
For sure. Will do. My name is Brandon Chase. I'm a martial artist, and I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was born in Calgary, Alberta. I lived in Alberta for the first 9 years of my life. Most of the time we spent in a small town called Dewsbury. When I was 9 years old, we moved to Newfoundland because Mom's family is from here. I completed high school in Bay Roberts and graduated from Ascension Collegiate in 2013. 1 year after graduating from high school, I decided to move back to Alberta. I worked in the labor industry in various different jobs up until the time of my car crash.
Right. Well, you know what? That brings me to what we're here to talk about today. This car crash you had was a really traumatic accident. There was some really unfortunate circumstances around it. Can you tell me about the crash and why it happened and what occurred during it?
Well, I'll tell you the truth, Mike, I don't remember the day of my car crash, but I was told that it was a warm summer day, June 27, 2015, and I was at a bachelor party for my stepbrother. We were paintballing. We were finishing paintballing. I was offered a ride back with a guy I didn't know. I guess I said the ride with him. Apparently, no one knew that this guy had been drinking. We're on the highway and traffic came to a standstill. My drunk driver pulled down, legal U-turn into the road, and an upcoming SUV going 107 kilometers an hour hit me on my passenger side. I'm extremely lucky I even survived, let alone walking and talking again.
Agreed. And when you woke up, what was your diagnosis? What happened? Do you remember that? Like, what were they telling you at that time?
Well, Mike, when I woke up, I was in the hospital for 3 months until I actually kind of woke up, kind of then came to and came conscious and stuff like that. I was diagnosed with a very bad brain injury. It made everything more challenging for me and difficult to do. The ICU doctors not giving my family much hope for survival. They said if I survived, I would probably only function at a vegetative state. The brain injury has affected my cognitive function as well as balance and coordination. This has made my rehab very, very challenging, and I have had to work very hard to overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
I also had dysarthria. That means that my speech muscles are weak and makes it very hard for me to speak clearly. I had to really concentrate to form words that can be understood. Because of my speech and balance, people often think I'm drunk.
Mm.
And my brain injury also makes me less inhibited, so that I say things sometimes without even thinking. It used to be a lot worse in the early days, but I have a lot of coaching, Mom, and it's still improving.
Yeah, that's right. And and that is the amazing thing. You were in a coma. They had given you a pretty scary prognosis, but you are walking, you're moving, you're talking, you've improved so much. How did your rehab progress? What did it entail? Tell me all about that, because it must have been a heck of a journey to get to where you are now.
For sure. I started my rehab in an acute care hospital, Foothills in Calgary. And initially, when I did not seem to be coming around, the doctors were preparing to send me to long-term care. Then I suddenly started to show signs. I stayed on that unit for almost 5 months. Now I started working on all the basics again. I had to learn how to do everything all over again. Talking, walking, putting myself, speaking, eating, and eventually feeding myself again. I made great progress and was then accepted into a very intense rehab program at the Howard Johnson Brain Injury Rehab Center in Pinoca, Alberta. I stayed here for 14 months. 14 months, Mike.
That's a year of your life.
Yeah, 5 days a week, 9 to 5. It was like my job. I worked hard, and I went from wheelchair to walker to eventually walking poles.
Yep.
Rehab will be ongoing for me the rest of my life.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it's amazing because I know you walk around very well now. We're talking on Zoom, so no one can see that, but you're moving around. It's funny. You just did your 1, 2, 3, 4. You listed off your hands, and I'm sure that would have been a challenge when you first began. But one of the things you've really adopted recently, and I follow you on Instagram, and you're always in the gym. So now that you've been able to get mobile, you're hitting the gym pretty hard. How important has that exercise been for you to sort of get you to your next level?
Exercise is an ongoing part of my everyday life now. Before the epidemic, I was seeing a personal trainer in Calgary. Jessica has trained professional athletes after injury and helped them return to their sport. She was awesome, and I hope to return to her once I could return to Calgary. I joined a gym here in St. John's and have been working at Rough Fitness. Good gym. Rough Fitness is a good gym.
Yeah.
I do leg press, dumbbells, and squats for fitness training. People there are very friendly and help me out sometimes. I also have been working out in my home gym. I have a spin cycle as well as a total gym and exercise band. I've done some work with a physiotherapist as well as a kinesiologist. I also go to martial arts when I can and have been welcome to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at a few different dojos. People have been very friendly and helpful.
Yeah. Well, that's because you're a friendly and helpful guy yourself. And I think that people like to be around that kind of energy, especially because you're doing so well right now. So what's your real message for people? And in particular, when it comes to people that face a serious injury and they're trying to get better and they're frustrated because they're not rehabbing as quick as they thought, what's your advice for them?
My message for people who have occurred serious injury is to never give up and never stop rehab. There's always room to improve. I still go to the gym and work on my fitness. This is not just good for my body, it also helps my mind.
Good. Yeah, and that's great advice. And I think that's a universal message for everybody. I'm glad you could be here, Brandon. It's really brave of you to share your story. I'm glad you're doing so great. So I'm sure we'll check back in someday and see how you're making out. But you keep on working hard in the meantime. And thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks again, Mike.
That was Brandon Chase sharing his amazing story of recovery from a car accident caused by a drunk driver. Keep moving forward, Brandon, because you're doing great. When we come back, we'll talk with pro skier Dave Whelan, who shares his story and some advice for those facing daunting rehabs. Welcome back. We're here with Dave Whelan, who's sharing his dramatic injury and rescue following a backcountry ski incident that left him in the ICU for over a month and took over 2 years to get him back to where he wanted to be. Dave talks about his attitude in facing a massive challenge and how he stayed positive during the roller coaster that is rehab. Positive mindset, small goals, and being a health advocate all resonate throughout his interview. But let's hear it from him. Hey, Dave, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's an important topic, and you've got a really important story to share with people. Today we're talking about injuries and how people overcame them. It's kind of like a celebration about something that feels like a massive tragedy when it occurs to folks. For those people that might not have caught our episode where you were on before, can you tell us about the accident that you had happen to you?
Yeah. So basically I had a backcountry skiing accident in Europe, where I skied off a cliff that I didn't see coming. So it was a fairly large impact that left me pretty beat up. I basically had a tibia plateau explosion, had a concussion, had a collapsed lung, had a number of other things going on. I was by myself. So luckily someone found me in that state at the bottom of the cliff. And, it was a whole process to get me out of there. From the time I landed at the bottom of that cliff to the time I got to the hospital, it was about 5 hours. I was in the ICU at a hospital in Austria for about a month, and then medevac back to Newfoundland, St. John's. And it was a better part of, 2-year recovery for the kind of bulk of it, and continues to this day, really.
Wow. I mean, and for somebody like you who is so athletic and is such a big part of your life, one of the things that I really want to help people understand is it's a long road. So when that first happened, what were your first thoughts, and, how did you sort of get the right frame of mind to start coming out of the recovery?
It's funny, because for me, it kind of started basically as soon as I hit the ground. I realized pretty quick that it was serious. I was by myself, and I realized there wasn't any immediate help around me. So kind of had to take hold of it myself then. And that involved some kind of manipulation of my body there in the snow, and a lot of kind of breathing and just kind of conversations with myself to kind of get myself to a calm place so I could figure out and solve the situation that was in front of me. And that mentality kind of, transferred to the hospital, into the hospital bed. And then beyond that, once I got home. So it was a lot of a mental game, you know what I mean? Like, it was very, very much recognizing what was going on in front of you, having that conversation with yourself, being comfortable with what had happened, what is happening, what's going to happen. And, just kind of having the mental fortitude to move through that.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about that, I mean, these days information is so readily available. So you can go and get stuck down a rabbit hole of what's going to happen, what's the worst case scenario, and when you look at an injury like yours, for those people that don't know what your injury was, your leg basically exploded. And then as a result of that, the pressure inside the leg became so enormous, they had to split it open to let it breathe and drain. So when you look at those types of things, I'm sure that you could find lots of information that say you're never going to recover. But what made you latch on to that piece of hope that says, maybe I can get better and get back to normal?
It's a tough question. I think, for me, coming from an athletic background, someone who I think generally appreciates life, when it happened, I saw the worst case scenario in front of me, and I could see that very clearly. I could see that path in front of me, and it was literally just a choice. My choice was to focus on that and go down that path, or I can kind of turn my head the other way and look more at the hard road and what it would take to kind of get me back to where I needed to be, and simply make that choice to kind of go down that road. I know that sounds easy when I say it out loud, but it is just, for me, it was having those real hard conversations with myself and, making that deal with myself. That deal being that, like, if I didn't put in all the effort that I possibly could to kind of get where I needed to be, then I knew that at the end of it, I wasn't going to be disappointed with the result, because I knew that I put in that effort to kind of get where I had to go,
Mm-hmm. And along the way, did you use little milestones to help keep you motivated? Say, okay, I'm on the right track. I just did something I wanted to do.
Yeah. I mean, big time. Like, this injury for me was devastating, because the sports I'm involved in, skiing, mountain biking, surfing, all these things, they were very dependent on my injury kind of getting better. So, I set like little milestones of skiing, for example, like literally just kind of walking in the snow up the hill, when I was able to do that. For being in the water, simply just, putting on my wetsuit and getting in the water. And I'll just like, those tiny, tiny, tiny little steps over time just kind of add up and up and up and up. And then all of a sudden you're somewhere where you never thought you would be. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So for me, it was really just have your ultimate goal way down the road, but like, don't focus on that. Focus on the next little thing you got to get to. Take that accomplishment and celebrate it, and then keep going,
That's right. That's right. Well, I was there for one of your milestones, and it's amazing when you can see that you can take the body, which is absolutely shattered, and then be able to repair it. We had that with our previous guest, Brandon Chase, who was in a traumatic accident, who wasn't supposed to walk again, but is now going to the gym and exercising. How did you choose what you should do? Did you seek out expert advice? Like, did you surround yourself with people that knew how to treat these conditions? Like, how'd you navigate that? Because that might not be everybody's skill set.
It's a tough thing to do, because, really when you have a traumatic injury, in the system that we exist in, there's a lot of amazing people around that want to help. But in general, person A isn't talking to person B, isn't talking to C, isn't talking to person D. So what that means is that you really have to be your own advocate in your injury. So for me, I just went down the rabbit hole of every aspect of it, and I educated myself as best I could on what the massage therapy was going to do, what the nerve therapy was going to do, what chiro was going to do, what physio was going to do, and try to connect all those dots and make some sense of it, and communicate to each of those people what I was feeling, what I felt needed to happen, what I educated myself on, and what the other people who are helping me were saying. Because no one's going to do that for you at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. You really just have to be your own advocate. You have to educate yourself.
That's right. That's a big aspect of health literacy. And that's one of the things we try and do in the show. And I guess that's a message that came out in our previous interview, is that you do have to be proactive with your health, and at each stage continue to progress it. So if somebody was listening right here and they've incurred a severe injury of some sort that could easily be deemed as being something that could disable them, but there is a chance they could recover, what would you tell them to do at this point?
First of all, I would tell them to have the conversation with themselves that, this is not going to be easy. This is going to be extremely difficult. It's going to be extremely uncomfortable, and accept that, don't get caught up in the difficulty of it. It's very easy to do. It's very easy to get caught up in the difficulty, in the pain, in all that. So if you, as an individual who's experiencing an injury, if you just have that conversation with yourself early on and kind of make that contract with yourself that, yeah, this is going to be hard and this is going to be difficult, and you switch your brain to kind of get there, it'll be a lot easier moving forward. And once you do that, once you make that contract with yourself, then turn to the education side of things and educate yourself as much as you possibly can on what your issue is, what your injury is, and how it affects the rest of your body, how it affects your mind, how it affects everything. Mm-hmm. And, it's a lot of information, it's a lot to navigate, but the more you take in and the more you understand, the better the overall picture for you will be in the end. And the more you will understand, and the better you will be able to tackle your own injury with the help of others.
That's right. I think that a lot of the time in a medical system, it's hurry up and wait. And that's only because it is so overburdened and tests can be so difficult to get and access to specialists can be so challenging. It's about doing what you can do while you can do it, while you're waiting for the next thing to happen. And I think that's great advice for people. Dave, thanks for joining us today. And thanks for sharing your story again. For anybody who wants to check out our full episode, you can find that on vlcm.com and on Spotify. It's a great story. It's very inspiring. Great to see you, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
That was Dave Whelan sharing some great advice on how to make sure you keep in the right frame of mind during a tough recovery. When we come back, we'll talk to internationally recognized motivational speaker Candice Carnahan, whose message of safety will resonate with all of us. We'll be right back. We're talking with safety educator and motivational speaker Candice Carnahan, who shares her message globally with organizations she works with. Now, we've been friends for a long time, actually since university, so I've seen her trajectory as she has become one of the most influential safety motivational speakers in the world. We're really lucky to have her on the show today, so let's check out our conversation. Hey, Candice, welcome to the show.
Hello, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I talk about a full circle moment. I mean, geez, we've known each other for most of our lives, really. And it's such a great opportunity. It's so nice to chat with you today about what you do now and what you love. Tell everybody who doesn't know you a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, it's been over 20 years for us.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm born in Miramichi. I actually make my home in Halifax now, and I'm a motivational speaker. I've been sharing my story and the lessons that I learned from a day that really changed my life forever, all over the world now for the past 2 decades. Yeah. What else? I have 2 French bulldogs, and I love traveling in my camper van. When I'm not in the air.
Well, that's right. I mean, we follow each other's social media too. And a lot of people here in St. John's have probably heard you speak because you speak in a lot of industrial settings. And speaking of that day that changed your life, I remember that day, but tell me about the situation that kind of led you to the path you're on now.
Well, I guess, in a nutshell, the day that changed my life forever was August 11th in 1999 when we were still in school, Mike. I was finishing up my summer employment at the mill in Miramichi as a summer student, and I stepped over a conveyor belt system, and it was a commonly used shortcut. The machine, I didn't realize it at the time, should have been guarded, but it was not. And that step really, I guess that day ended up being the last step I ever took with my left foot. It was taken into the crush point. I mean, sometimes people call it a nip point, but it doesn't nip you once it gets you. It's far more severe than that. And so my foot was crushed between 2 of the rollers in the conveyor belt system. And I was thankfully rescued from the belt after 30 minutes, very traumatic half hour of my life. And I lost my leg below the knee as a result of that incident in August. So I had to, take some time off school. I didn't go back that September. I went back in January to finish up my degree. So yeah, it happened just at the very end of the summer on the final season of me working at the paper mill as part of summer employment.
That's right. That's right. And that accident made you very aware that there was kind of a gap when it came to educating people about safety. You now speak with companies all over the world. I mean, you've been as far away as Australia working with these companies. What do you share with people about that experience, and, how did it change you?
Well, I mean, I guess first of all, bridging the gap, I never used the word accident. So that's no offense. It's a word that's still commonly used. But for me, I always say incident because, an accident, there's lots of different definitions, but the main definition is that it's 2 unforeseeable events that come together, that create a negative or unexpected outcome. And we were calling it that in the beginning, what a terrible accident, what a freak accident. What were the chances of that? 1 in a million. And so I would go, yeah, you're right. It's awful. This is what people would say to me. And then I started getting uncomfortable with the word accident because I thought, the mill was found at fault for taking a guard off the machine. And on top of that, the emergency stop system was disabled, and on and on and on we could go with contributing factors to the incident that caused me to lose my leg. But really, when you think about it, none of those, it wasn't unforeseeable. Right. And it really isn't unexpected because when you take off safety guards or when you decide to pick up your phone and get behind the wheel or take a drink and get behind the wheel and something goes wrong, we know the ramifications of those behaviors. So I prefer to use the word incident because I find that an accident makes people feel like there was really nothing more we could have done to prevent it. And as you know, Mike, I mean, you and I, oddly enough, have ended up in the same, on a bit of the same path, got there different ways. But as you know, these injuries are preventable. So I want people to be empowered in knowing that each and every day they have not only the obligation, but also the opportunity and the ability to do things differently. And that these little things done differently each and every day really do amount to big things, making big changes. I always say, if you take care of the little things, the big things typically will take care of themselves.
Well, that's right. The whole point of this show is to give people the tools so that they can avoid maybe health incidents in their future that could be preventable. But, I think one of the things that's so powerful about what you do is you share your lived experience. How did that event change you as a person?
Oh, my goodness. It's so many. How long do we have? Well, I think, first of all, when this happened to me, I was very of the mind, the world was my oyster and, everything was great. School was fun. My family was healthy. And I would definitely say, I lost my footing in more ways than one that day. I did realize that you can have your whole existence turned upside down in the blink of an eye. And I certainly, I got into sharing my story very quickly after I recovered, not fully recovered, but I got to work at sharing my story within a year after my incident. And that's when I really started gaining some serious perspective and understanding. The more I was talking about what happened to me, you then have people coming and sharing their stories with you. So I always say sharing stories saves lives. Because you never know what personal experience or sentiment that it is that you're going to share with somebody that causes them to have a flash, a light bulb moment, an aha moment, or to say, you know what, I'm going to change my ways or do this differently, or I'm going to have that conversation that I thought was too tough to have. Or, one of my favorite slogans is if you see something, say something, and I'm going to have the courage to care enough to speak up and say something. So I think that, I really started learning so much more from the people that I was speaking to about what kinds of things were happening across many different industries and within different companies and what were the contributing factors, right? People would say, oh my gosh, for you, it was the conveyor belt, it was the guard off the conveyor belt. Well, no, it wasn't. It was long before that. It's the attitude we have towards health and safety. I walked over a conveyor belt system because I watched other people doing it. So I think I learned also on August 11th that I wasn't invincible. And, I say the first step in not getting hurt is knowing that you can be. That's a great lesson to learn. It's an especially great lesson to learn and survive, So I think that the list of lessons are certainly long, but what resounds the most with me is just what I've learned from other people from sharing my story.
That's right. And I think that whole point about, health isn't valued until it's lost, about feeling invincible, is sort of a really common theme throughout this whole show today. Before we get into more of the message that you share with people and make such a profound impact in their lives, one of the things we're also talking about is the experience for people that may be suffering right now and have to go through rehab. It could not have been easy for you to adjust to a new prosthesis when you got injured. Can you tell me a little bit about that process and what struggles you faced?
Oh, sure. I remember, just from the very beginning, even like being in the hospital bed and just being terrified of what it was going to feel like to put my residual limb in a leg and walk. How was it going to work? Was I going to be able to wear pretty shoes and high heels? And what were boys going to think? And what about short skirts? And how about dancing? My parents are going, what the, who's responsible for what happened to my daughter? But I had all my questions were more about my existence as a 21-year-old woman. Mm-hmm. And so I was very, I guess, of course I was scared of the unknown, but I wanted to get moving. So I was also very determined and motivated. Learning to walk was a challenge, but not as much as I guess what I would have thought it was. I mean, learning stairs, that was difficult. And it's so hard because it was so long ago to look back. But I did for creating this new program called Step Up Your Safety. And it's a video series. And my prosthetist in Moncton, Kirsten, actually went through the archives and found the video of me taking my first steps. And I had never seen it. And it brings a tear to my eye because I can tell that I'm trying to be tough, but really I don't want to see the pipe on my leg. I want my pants down. I want to put the pant leg down, and there's so much that I can see in that video that contradicts how I remember it. I remember it being not so bad, and I got right back on my feet, but I guess that's just the motivational speaker in me. I might have written the story a little bit, but what was the worst, I think, the most difficult thing for me to deal with was the feeling of the leg on my body. And I just used to love at night taking it off and feeling like that feeling of like your pajamas and naked and not like you had a work boot on all the time, which is what that prosthetic felt like to me. So I really treasured those moments of, waking up in the morning and not having to put the leg on and, dreaded having to all of a sudden put it all back on, because back then there were different sockets and socks and bandages and your residual limb was changing all the time. And, weather conditions, learning how to walk in snow, learning how to walk in ice, up hills, down hills, there were just so many challenges. And I was, at UNB. So yeah. Lots of uneven ground there.
we lived on a hill. So yes, we all lived on that hill. Yeah,
exactly. So, I mean, the rehab process, I do recall being very frustrated going to out to Grand Bay because they were asking me to put blocks back into the right space. And I just remember tossing them and saying, I didn't lose my arms. Why are you wasting my time? So I'm sharing that because I think that it's okay, to be frustrated when you've lost something. It's okay to be frustrated when you're trying to learn something new, but, eventually that present becomes the past. And as you move forward, you remember that happened, but it doesn't feel like you anymore because there is a light at the end of the tunnel and, you will adapt. And while I still sometimes, I still love taking my leg off every night at the end of the day, but it certainly doesn't feel like a big work boot anymore.
Welcome back. We're talking with safety educator and motivational speaker, Candice Carnahan, who shares her message globally with organizations she works with. Welcome back. We're talking with safety educator and motivational speaker, Candice Carnahan, who shares her message globally with the organizations that she works with. Let's hear her story about putting struggles into perspective, and my favorite part of the interview, when she talks about looking left when things are hard. You've been acknowledged on the national level and international level in the world of safety. You got into advocacy, and give folks a little bit of a background on what you do and where you go and who the people are you talk to with your work now.
Okay, sure. Well, I mean, it started very simply in high schools, and it was WHSCC back then, but now it's WorkSafe New Brunswick. And so while I was a case file or a claim number on the compensation side, getting my prosthetics, I was also their spokesperson on the prevention side. So that's how I got into it. And they had asked if I would go speak to high school kids. And really back then, all I had was, I didn't have all the lessons from other people. I just had what happened to me that day. And really that was enough. to kind of put the fear into kids to speak up and do the right thing. And you know, the three rights, right to refuse work, right to ask questions, right to be involved. That's what we were talking about back then. But I'll tell you just a quick little story. You know, I think it was either my first day or first week of doing presentations. And I went to a school where I would always start out and ask, who knows somebody here who's been hurt at work? Typically hands would go up and I would say, leave your hand up if you want to share with me what happened. And it was typically, my father did this, my uncle did that, my grandfather was a fisherman, this happened in working in the woods. But at this one school, every kid put their hand up as knowing someone who had been hurt at work. And when I asked them to leave their hand up if they would share, they all put their hands down very quickly. And then the principal of the school actually came up to me, kind of pulled me aside. And what we found out, or what I found out that I didn't know, was that those kids all knew someone who had been actually killed at work. And it was their classmate. It was a kid that had been killed on, working on the farm, as it unfortunately happens way too often still these days. And that was an aha moment for me, because I thought, wait a minute, if I'm talking to a group of kids who haven't even graduated high school yet, and they all know somebody who was actually killed at work and it was their friend, like, boy, do we ever have a lot of work to do. You know? And so I spoke with schools for a while, and I was then lucky enough to meet a gentleman called Paul Kells, whose son had been killed in a workplace incident. And Paul employed me as the spokesperson for Passport to Safety. So that's when I got involved with actually providing tools and education and trying to work on getting the workplace health and safety education into the curriculum in schools. Then I ran the course with Passport to Safety and started my own company, where I specifically started speaking across oil and gas industry, pulp and paper, manufacturing, a lot with mining. So I've been, worked all over, every province and territory in the country, probably most states, a few countries in Europe, Ireland, Australia. So it's been quite a ride. And it's now brought me to, kind of the pandemic in a way. I like to find the silver linings, gave me the time to develop Step Up Your Safety. So now I'm back to it's kind of come full circle again, because now I'm back to having an educational component that can be implemented in schools, in workplaces, in addition to a 60-minute, motivational speech.
One thing I want to leave our listeners with, in particular coming from you, I've known you for a long time and I've seen you do and accomplish amazing things. And I just really want to give a piece of advice to folks. Like, you overcame a massive personal challenge and you turned it into something that has been extremely positive, not only for yourself, but for other people. What advice do you give people that are facing those adversities in their life that seem like they can't overcome it? What should they hear?
Well, in a nutshell, you can. So I think that for me, a moment in time for me was when I was in Mexico, and I had worked my butt off to save money to go on this 3-month backpacking trip. And I had only been, 2 years with a prosthetic. I carried a spare leg in my backpack. I got a lot of strange looks for that. And I had gotten this brand new leg with silicone skin on it that I was going to wear. And I thought it looked so great. And I was in great shape. And I just put all this effort into going on this trip. And I was so proud of myself because I had started my speaking career and everyone said how, positive I was and good for me and, all of this kind of thing. And I got to Mexico and I couldn't walk. And I didn't know why. I didn't know if it was a sore. I didn't know if I was swollen. And then anyway, to kind of cut it short, this went on for 3-4 days. Finally, my boyfriend at the time who was with me, I just said, leave me alone for a day. I'm so frustrated, and I actually think I might have thrown a limb at him, but thankfully he brought it back to me. Didn't throw your legs at people. But I was just so frustrated because I had worked so hard to overcome and to move my life forward. And I felt like I was being stopped and that, I was so upset. So on that particular day, I decided I would get the crutches that Vaden had got for me, my partner at the time, at the first aid and go out to the Cerveza cart that I had seen. Because I had been cooped up. I'm unable to wear my limb for 4 days in beautiful Mexico. So I crutched out. And when I looked to the left, I noticed that there was nobody there, and it took a lot of work for me to get out there. It was a long crutch and it was hot, and I lost it. I can't believe it. Oh my God, all I wanted was a cold beer, and what kind of a vacation is this? And woe is me. And haven't I done enough already? And, isn't the work I do, why do I deserve this? Because I had never, ever asked why me. I always thought, why anyone? Why does this kind of stuff have to happen to anyone? And I was as close as I had ever come at that point in time, and ever did come in my entire life, to saying, why me? And I turned around and I was getting ready to crutch back, and oh, poor me with my brand new leg and my vacation for 3 months and this and that. And it was backpacking, but yeah, vacation. And then I heard a clinkle and a clankle, and I looked, and there was a man, and I couldn't see him because he was sitting on a Coca-Cola crate underneath the cerveza cart, and he smiled at me, and he had this beautiful smile, even though he had no teeth, and these sparkling eyes, and he had no limbs, no legs. He had 2 arms, but no legs. And he drove a skateboard to work and piled the Coke crates up. And that's where he worked to raise money for his 2 children and his wife, selling beers. And that was a huge lesson to me in overcoming and understanding that no matter what it is that's happening in your life, all you really have to do is be clear enough to open your eyes and look to the left, and you will see someone who has a challenge that is even more of a struggle by times than yours. And I think that if we can look to the left and gain perspective from all of the different struggles that people face in this world, it puts our own struggle into perspective. It helps us find common ground. I will say that I did go over. I might have had more than one cerveza with this man, and my Spanish got really, really great as the afternoon went on. And he was, sitting there admiring my fake leg, and we were, trying to communicate. And it wasn't about him being envious of what I had or me feeling sorry for him for what he had lost. It was just all about learning. And so I just think, there are people out there each and every day that can teach us lessons, but we have to get out of our own head and out of our own cycles in order to learn from them. And I guess in closing also, that's a message I actually share sometimes, a story I share sometimes with regard to safety. Because I think, if you're walking to work, driving to work, doing a task, and all you're thinking about is the fight you had with your spouse, or the bad news you got from the doctor, or something that, a wrong charge on your credit card statement, it doesn't matter what you're focusing on. But if you're not focusing on the task at hand, you're increasing your chances of being injured, because you're not seeing you're not seeing the lessons, you're not seeing the hazards, you're not seeing the things that you need to look out for that might not be marked with caution tape and orange cones.
That's right. We used to go on the rigs, and in the mirror that always had a little sticker that said, you're looking at the person who's responsible for your safety this morning. I'm sure you've seen that before.
Yes.
But for folks that might want to have you come in and chat with them, because I know you travel all over the country, and come talk to some of their groups of people that may or may not be safety sensitive in nature, how do they get a hold of you?
My website, CandiceCarnahan.com. And if you can't remember that, you can just go Candace one leg and I will pop up. And I've actually, Mike, as you know, when we've been chatting offline, I've been doing, a lot more work locally, and I'm really proud to say, that I've got my program now that allows me the opportunity to get to know the clients and the companies that I'm working with, and to actually customize a step-up program that will best suit their needs and challenges and address the obstacles they're facing. So I'm hoping in the years to come to keep up doing the big stage conferences. I'm off to Orlando in a few weeks, and I love that. But I'm really looking forward to working with organizations locally and getting to know them, their safety culture, and their people, and really doing some boots on the ground work. So I think some organizations think that I only work with great big huge companies, but that's not true. So anyone can find me on my website and reach me that way.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today, and some great wisdom that a lot of us will be able to apply. I think this is a really helpful episode for people to understand that we face challenges. There's ways to overcome it, but there's also ways to prevent a lot of bad things from happening if we're careful. So thanks so much, Candace.
That's right, my friend. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you to my guests for sharing their stories. For anyone out there facing an injury, their themes of staying positive, surrounding yourself with the right support team, and celebrating small wins seem universal to recovery. Candace's message of safety and knowing the risks of activities and the difference between an incident and an accident should all make us think twice before taking risks, because we can all get hurt. Well, thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Wall. We'll see you back here next week for another episode of the Wellness and Healthy Lifestyle Show on your VOCM.